So we want to interrogate the notion of harm as well, concerned with trauma and the citizen. One thing I always say is that trauma is an insurance policy for the maintenance of the citizen and the citizen subject. It's a way of delineating the borders between what is proper, what is neurotypical, what is acceptable, what is human, and what is not human, what is discardable. There is a necropolitics. Just in case you are unfamiliar with the terms, and there will be many terms we use here that will be possibly new to some of you listening. The term I've just used, necropolitics, is a way of analyzing how regimes of power proliferate death as a means of managing life. So it's a marking of bodies, right? And this comes with an analysis that is attached to the philosopher, the late philosopher Michel Foucault. Michel Foucault spoke about biopower. His analysis, again, was about how sovereignty was changing, right? And maybe in times past, we would speak about kingdoms and kings and queens as the nodes of power. Today, we don't have kings and queens per se, but we have disciplinary regimes and ways that bodies and populations are maintained, right? For instance, if you know someone who doesn't have a job, or if you don't have a job, for instance, you may not fit within accepted standards of proper citizenship. But it's not the police that comes to get you. It might be your parents or your neighbors that police you and remind you what it means to be proper, what it means to be seen, what it means to be recognized. So Michel Foucault's analysis was a way of noticing how bodies police each other. The Cameroonian philosopher, Achille Mbembe, made more complex this idea, this reading of biopower. And his analysis was that in managing populations, certain aspects of that population need to die. An example might be in 2014, the migrants from some part of Africa trying to make it into Greece and dying on a boat. And then the news quickly just moving on from there and exploring other things that were of concern, like what Kim Kardashian is wearing today. When the world moves quickly away from bodies and their suffering, because it just feels acceptable, a normal part of the violent normativity of the world, then it does seem like certain bodies are okay to die. Think about the pandemic, for instance, and how in some quarters, in the United Kingdom, no less, some people were allowed to die. Some doctors came in and they would not issue vital medicines because it was so little, they didn't have enough. And so they basically said, well, these are okay. They turned their back on their Hippocratic oath, so to speak. And there was hardly anything they could do in that circumstance. But the idea that it's okay for some to die in order to maintain the larger population is the idea of necropolitics. And so this idea of harm running through civilization, this idea that we're not just living in times of peace versus times of war, but that the normative is violent through and through, is an invitation that we make in this exploration, and that we would like to buttress as we explore a different understanding of trauma as a relationality instead of as an individual or individualized experience. If we start to think about trauma as individual, what that cuts out is the ways that we are connected with ancestry, the ways that we are connected with technologies, and the ways that technologies use our bodies in return. You see, we're not just the users of tools. Tools also modify the users of tools. What is trauma fundamentalism introducing into our understanding of bodies? And what does it obscure? So we will interrogate the notion of harm. We might even talk about triggers and trigger responses. We might talk about the ways that trauma has floated from its psychopathological, etiological deployment into popular usage, and why that seems to be the case. We will explore the concept of the victim and certain modalities of victimology, how it seems at some level, beyond considerations of proper harm done to people around the world, that the category of the victim is almost replacing the category of the citizen. And this is probably noticeable in the ways that movements like Black Lives Matter and even the Me Too movement was hijacked by people that it wasn't intended for. There's a lot to talk about here, and we will walk and work through it as we examine trauma and the citizen. So when we do the live session, these explorations will gain flesh, we'll flesh them out. None of this is meant as judgmental, as an attempt to binarize the conversation or to binarize populations. This is an attempt to dive into the murkiness, the opacity, the complexity of our conversations about harm and trauma and who gets to be named as harmed or traumatized. I think in unraveling these concepts in these ways, we might see in some way how they contribute to an atmosphere of pain and an atmosphere of healing as well. So our exploration from a biopolitics to a necropolitics to a history of trauma and the transjective theory of trauma will be explored in detail as we meet in person. In the last module, module 2, I had referred to the tsunami of 2004 and how a massive international solidarity effort, despite great intentions, seemed to focus on the tourists in those places of explosive harm, those places that were impacted by the tsunami. They focused on the tourists and kind of left out the locals, the people who were primarily affected by the tsunami. So that in a sense, and this is me repeating myself, solidarity can often form some kind of regime of control and can repeat troubling dynamics that have a political underbelly, whose question is always who gets to be traumatized and who gets to be harmed, because that's also connected to who shall we pay attention to, who shall we dedicate resources to, who shall we treat, who's worthy of our focus. Trauma is political. Trauma is moral. Trauma is a way of drawing lines between bodies. And coming to those lines is an important aspect of what a different kind of therapeutic longing might do in a world that is troublingly pathological in its normativity. Just focus a little bit on the idea of the citizen. The citizen is not just the human person. The citizen is an entire enterprise of practices and processes, more than human and human. The citizen is the secretion of a cartography of projects that involve governance and the state and industry and highways and legislation, All of this makes space for the citizen to be possible. You see, one of the things we'll be doing through this course is thinking through processuality, through relationality. We'll be thinking through assemblage, right? Instead of focusing on the thing, we'll focus on the web that makes the thing possible. Because an idea that runs through this course is that the universe isn't made of things. The universe is made of relationships. The citizen is the convenience of the nation state. But the nation state constantly has to draw boundaries between what's the citizen and what isn't the citizen. Except in these times, we are meeting a crisis, an unprecedented crisis. This crisis is given many names: the Capitalocene, the Anthropocene, climate chaos, climate change, climate breakdown, and the prospects of civilizational disorder or some kind of dystopia. As these forces converge, it seems that the state is struggling to provide room for the citizen. Like the space of the citizen is shrinking. And as such, we are clamoring for this privileged space. We are rushing to whatever space is left so that we keep on getting the power of statehood. In my understanding of the world and its troubles today, I think the space of the victim is expanding. Again, noticing victims or the victim as a political category is not a way of denying pain or that people suffer. But it's a way of noticing that we seem to be instantly proliferating the spaces and the platforms where the only way the citizen can be noticed is through the prism of trauma. So this is what Guattari would call normal pathology. It's not that the normal is separate from pathology. It's now that the normal is pathological. So the citizen is increasingly the victim. You might notice it in how we tend to play up an Olympics of oppression. In order to be seen, we need to increase our credentials of being harmed. This is one of the complaints of scholars who study the Me Too movement. Zizek in particular, Slavoj Zizek, in noticing how it seemed white women increasingly became a part of the Me Too movement, which seemed to have been dedicated to minorities in the first place. Everyone wants a piece of the category of the victim, because the more I become traumatized, the more I can name myself within the vortices of trauma, the more the state can dedicate attention to me, the more I can win acclaim on social media. And so these are the forces and the political events shaping how we understand pain and trauma. None of it judgmental, but is an invitation for us to deepen our work and our politics and our advancements of what healing and health and well-being might look like from a decolonial perspective, critical perspectives.